Kashtira is supposed to be dead, donezo, completely buried alive and gone for good, right? Hell, I won't even lie, I thought this was the case as well. But what if I told you that one of the best deck builders in Yu-Gi-Oh history and another top tier duelist in his own regard collaborated to bring forth a Kashtira deck that not only completely destroyed and dominated a large scale Age of Overlord case tournament, but that this deck also went completely undefeated in doing so. What you see before you is the Super Stun pure Kashtira build that was built and constructed by none other than 3-time YCS champion and my all-time favorite Yu-Gi-Oh duelist of all time, because I'm as old school as it gets and I remember learning about this dude all the way back in the GX era, Jeff Jones. Jeff threw this deck together in just one morning and gave it to his longtime partner and fiance Max Reynolds. Max played the deck at an Age of Overlord case tournament, going completely undefeated and ultimately winning the event. There are a couple of things to note here, like the fact that Max isn't just a standard run-of-the-mill duelist. While Jeff may be considered the household name in our small Yu-Gi-Oh community, Max is certainly no slouch, as he was just the runner-up at YCS Cancun, Mexico, playing Rescue Ace about a month ago. Translation, this wasn't just some random guy who got lucky, Max is an incredibly good duelist. Second, Age of Overlord wasn't actually legal for this tournament because it happened during the sneak peek weekend. Regardless, I thought that this performance was not only noteworthy, but pretty amazing all things considered, seeing how Kashtira has pretty much fallen off the planet, no pun intended, since Arise Heart's banning. I thought this deck was fantastically built, and obviously I wanted to not only discuss it, but break it down and talk about the potential for Kashtira to be played in a metagame that is post Age of Overlord. For starters, I think it's quite evident for anyone who looks at this Kashtira build for more than a couple of minutes that this is a straight up stun deck. Much to the dismay of lots of Yu-Gi-Oh players out there and other decks, Kashtira was always known for its ability to macrocosmos everything and basically make the graveyard non-existent with its Floodgate boss monster, Arise Heart plus Dimension Shifter. However, with Arise Heart banned, substitutions obviously have to be made. A full play set of Dimensional Fissure should more than make up for that. While Deep Fissure isn't quite as annoying as Arise Heart, it's definitely a worthwhile stand-in, as basically no meta deck outside of maybe Floowandereeze wants to actually play under a card that banishes all its monsters. Obviously, decks like Tear-Elements and Branded Chimera have monsters that either trigger in the graveyard or activate while in the grave, so this is going to be a serious hindrance to those decks, but even ones that aren't so graveyard reliant like Vanquish Soul and Labyrinth will still find it extremely frustrating. As a Vanquish Soul player, not being able to go into Rock of Vanquisher without permanently losing one of your monsters while simultaneously losing access to Vanquish Soul Continue for the entire duel is something that I'm really not a fan of. Labyrinth players probably won't enjoy having their furniture pieces all banished or them just not working at all because Deep Fissure is already face up on the field and the cards need to go to the graveyard to resolve their effects. Deep Fissure also stops Kashtira from being hit with Droll and Lockbird, which can utterly destroy the deck because of all the searching cards with Prosperity, Pressure Planet, Unicorn, Fenrir, etc, etc. There are even some decks like Unchained that at first glance appear to be insulated from Deep Fissure, but when you look a little bit deeper, you'll see things like Yama not hitting the graveyard turns off its Reborn effect, no graveyard means no Soul of Rage target to add back, and Servara being banished means that it won't be able to trigger its effect. Another huge curveball a lot of players probably didn't see coming was the inclusion of Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries in the deck. This is a card that I don't believe I've seen very much of in Kashtira, if at all, but in theory can easily work for a couple of reasons. One, when going second, Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries can be one of the most devastating hand traps in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Some decks have some very specific starter extra deck monsters they basically want to go to on their opening turn every single game for utility, cards like Rock of Vanquisher or Unchained Soul Yama, while others have strong boss monsters that are the center or the core of their defenses that of course provide disruptions like Expertly Noir. Cherries can eliminate all of these plays permanently. It's nearly impossible to play around around in game 1, and even the hand trap counters that are commonly played in the metagame, like Crossout Designator and the Triple Tactics cards, won't actually stop it. I personally tried Cherries in Vanquish Soul last format because of some of these reasons, and of course it being a dark attribute monster, which Vanquish Soul needs a bunch of, but eventually dropped the card because I felt that it was too dead when going first. However, in Kashtira specifically, it can be normal summoned and then allows you to take any Kashtira monster and synchro summon into Baron de Fleur, which gives you a disruption and a negation, and when you pair that with cards like Kashtira Birth, you can just summon that same Kashtira monster back, and if it's something like a Fenrir, then you get your disruption back as well. When you keep in mind that Kashtira only has one legal extra deck monster, I don't really think that space is that big of an issue for the deck right now. Obviously you're going to run a few supplemental rank 7s, but the point is you definitely have enough space to dedicate for, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 Cherries targets for some of the common cards that you're going to play against across the metagame. Especially again when you consider that using it in the right matchup, the card can actually just be game winning by itself when it resolves. The last thing I want to bring up is that Kashtira as a theme is still way closer to full power than most of us might realize. Yes, the extra deck powerhouses like a Rise Heart and Diabolus might be banned and probably not coming back for a long time, but the main deck is nearly fully intact. This is worth mentioning because in the OCG, Konami took a completely different approach to hitting Kashtira, even after they absolutely gutted the consistency of the deck with limits to Fenrir, Pressure Planet, Unicorn, in addition to the fact that Pot of Prosperity is limited over there as well. Duelists continued to play the deck and even top events, but just like in this case, they primarily played it as a floodgate based stun deck. In the TCG, this isn't remotely the case, at least when it comes to those hits, because we still have all the important starter cards at unlimited status, with the exception of Unicorn, which of course is at semi-limited status. This is just my opinion, but to make up for that, I think that Jeff added a bunch of other floodgates and powerful hand traps like Cherries that can completely destroy an unsuspecting duelist. See Summon Limit and Droll that are in the side deck. The Kashtira main deck monsters like Fenrir and Unicorn can also serve as solid disruptions themselves. Unicorn specifically is arguably far stronger right now than it was last format because people are most likely not playing Unicorn ratios anymore, i.e. running extra copies of cards that they basically know are going to get ripped from Unicorn through the process of dueling against Kashtira. Now that you don't have to worry about that anymore, there's a good chance that you might be able to rip cards like SP Little Knight or Access Code Talker or Zeus or Typhon out of your opponent's extra deck, and they're only playing one copy. You won't have to worry about that card for the entire duel. The question that needs to be asked now is something like this being of course Max's performance, repeatable? This was pretty agave after all, and as crazy as this sounds, in my opinion, I think yes. Obviously, I'm not saying that Kashtira is going to go undefeated and win the next YCS, but I do think that we can see the deck contend with other meta ones, especially if you're playing Kashtira and you devote so much of your main deck to these huge stun and anti-meta cards that often people can't account for in game 1 and get completely thrown off by. I mean, seriously, someone hits you with Winter Cherries, taking out your best extra deck monster in game 1. How do you even respond to that when all 3 of your copies get banished, you can't get them back, and then your plan is just completely disrupted? Kashtira right now is basically best played as a stun deck, but unlike a lot of the other stun decks that you'll see at YCSs and regionals, Kashtira's core engine is not only insanely strong, but more importantly, it's insanely consistent. This is like the problem with every stun deck ever that people just kind of throw together. Your basic plain Jane stun deck usually has no way of getting to its powerhouse stun monsters, the Fossil Dynas, the Inspector Borders. Basically, you can't search these cards, which of course is completely RNG. Kashtira, on the other hand, has about 1 billion ways to get to any of its specific monsters, and sometimes like Fenrir, these cards actually provide disruptions to be used against the opponent as well. With that all said, YCS Indianapolis is going to be taking place over the weekend. I'm actually going to be watching a ton of the coverage and the feature matches, so I can try to do a recap video on Monday. But yeah, Kashtira could be one of those decks that nobody anticipates, no one really prepares for, and then it ends up sneaking up on a lot of people, getting a bunch of free wins off of its floodgates and its anti-meta powerhouse cards. And who knows, maybe it could end up sneaking into the top cut, although maybe it might take someone like a Max Reynolds, take an incredibly talented duelist to get it there. Anyways, whatever you guys thought, leave it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching as always.